Star Wars 7 by 7 episode 1987. So, we're continuing in our safe zone and talking about the Rise of Skywalker, but what exactly is the Skywalker Saga? What does that mean, really? And therefore, what does the conclusion of it mean to us as Star Wars fans? That's what we're going to talk about today. Punch it! Hey Rebel Rouser, I'm Alan Voivod and this is Star Wars 7 by 7. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode. So here is what sort of inspired the thoughts on this episode. I've been thinking about the whole Skywalker Saga business for a while, as I'm sure you have too. Just the notion that the Skywalker Saga is coming to an end, and we know that the Skywalker Saga is specifically the episodic movies, right? Episode 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So Rogue One is not a Skywalker Saga movie. Solo, a Star Wars story, is not a Skywalker Saga movie. It's just those particular numbered episodes. But that doesn't really tell us much. I mean, you could end the Skywalker Saga by saying, we're not going to number these movies anymore and be done with it because we just don't want to go to Roman numerals starting with 10, right? I mean, there's a bit of an arbitrariness to that notion, if you will, at least just on its face. So you have to look for meaning in another fashion. And that's been delivered in bits and pieces here and there, but I think one of the most coherent ways of expressing it just came out recently in an interview with Kathleen Kennedy and Michelle Rejuan. I hope I'm pronouncing Michelle's last name properly. My apologies if not. With IO9. And IO9 was talking about, or just the whole interview was talking about the Rise of Skywalker and the sequel trilogy in general. And the lead into the particular question that led to the idea that I am specifically interested in exploring with you is about ideas of what this trilogy would be and not wanting to cement oneself into a particular idea and therefore limit the possibilities for where you could go with the story. And so that relates to the use of cementing in the question that's posed that directly relates. Believe me, it's going to make more sense when I give you the quote from the article. So here we go. The question begins with this particular statement. You say you can't cement something in Star Wars, and yet the marketing calls this, quote, the end of the Skywalker saga, unquote. And then here's the question. No matter what happens in this movie, the story could go on. So isn't putting that label on it creatively constrictive? And Kathleen Kennedy's response is, it's only creatively constrictive with regard to the Skywalkers because, quote, the saga, unquote, really references the Skywalker family. And that's what we're bringing to a conclusion. There is an inevitability with that because of the actors and the characters they're playing. So that's really what we're looking at more than anything. At least in my lifetime, there's never going to be an end to Star Wars. So this isn't the end of Star Wars, it's the end of that family saga. See, I told you it would be a lot clearer once I actually read the quote to you. So let's talk about this. And let's go a step further, okay? I don't think this is really going out of bounds to say it's not just the family saga, but it's also the family saga as it relates to galactic affairs, galactic politics, right? Because ultimately we don't care about the Skywalker saga if it's happening on a farm in the middle of Tatooine, right? It has no ultimate meaning to us. It's not mythic, it's not epic. I mean, I guess you could find a way to make that mythic and epic, but it's not the story that we've been working on for 42 years, okay? So, yeah, it has to be about the Skywalker saga as it relates to the giant picture of the galaxy far, far away. And if you're going to end that saga, that means that you have to end this family's influence on the galactic situation. So that means that Kylo Ren has to exit the picture in some fashion. I don't think that means he's going to just decide, I'm kind of over this First Order business. I think I'll open a smoothie shop on the beaches of Scarif, right? That's not a viable out for this particular situation. So a while back, I ran a poll where I asked listeners and friends on Twitter what they thought would be Kylo Ren's fate by the end of the Rise of Skywalker. The options were around two choices, alive or dead, and evil or redeemed. And the winner hands down was dead and redeemed. That would certainly end the whole Skywalker saga, right? Because he's the last one, as far as we know, and boy, that would be messy if they sprung another one on us. But even dead and evil, it still ends the Skywalker saga. But it does kind of raise an interesting possibility, which is that the clash between the Resistance and the First Order doesn't necessarily have to be resolved in this movie. One of the things that you and I talked about over the course of the last couple of years is how it seems like there would have to be a significant time jump in order for the Resistance to gather enough forces to really commit to defeating the First Order, to have a shot at pulling it off. And as we know, the Rise of Skywalker is not taking place significantly far in the future compared to The Last Jedi. It's taking place only a little more than a year later. And certainly it seems like it's possible that they've mustered up quite the armada, at least from some of the footage that we've seen so far. But if what this really is the end of the Skywalker saga, then that's all it has to be. It doesn't have to be the end of the battle between the Resistance and the First Order. They could say, oh yeah, well, we got the Skywalker players out of it, but we've got one more movie for you, and that's going to be the movie that comes out in 2022. It could happen that way too. That's what they've kind of left the door open for. I'm just saying, logically, that is a possibility. But if this is the end of the Skywalker saga, then what does this title mean? What does the Rise of Skywalker mean? Well, there's been a lot of debate over it, and one thing I haven't seen is anybody checking a dictionary. And so I did, and there's a really interesting definition of the word rise that I don't think I've seen considered anywhere else. And so we're going to talk about that real quick after the break. Stay tuned. Hey Rebel Rouser, I've made some changes to the asteroid belt level at patreon.com/SW7X7, and they are all with sponsors in mind. So if you want to get the word out about your business, your product, your service to a dedicated Star Wars audience, then please check out patreon.com/SW7X7 and look for the asteroid belt level for details. Again, that's patreon.com/SW7X7. Welcome back. So I was on the Merriam-Webster website and scrolling down on the definition of rise, and lo and behold, one of the definitions turns out to be beginning or origin. And the example they provide is the river had its rise in the mountain. And so I got to churning on that, and suddenly it clicks into place for me. The title for The Rise of Skywalker suddenly makes a lot more sense to me if you're thinking about it as the beginning of Skywalker or the origin of Skywalker, especially with all the talk about how Palpatine was a necessary element for the Rise of Skywalker, why he had to be a part of closing out the trilogy of trilogies. He was, after all, doing the midichlorian stimulation from across the galaxy that led to the virgin conception of Anakin Skywalker. So if you're going to call the movie the beginning of Skywalker, then it seems like a must that you would have to have the person responsible for the beginning of Skywalker and the beginning of the Skywalker Saga involved in its conclusion. There is a very strong logic to that. So I feel like this title just suddenly made a lot more sense to me, and I'd be curious to know if it makes more sense to you as well. And that's what I've got for you today. I will say that if you're a patron of the show and you're checking out the previews that I'm posting, you're going to find out about an interview that I just did that will be coming up on the show in a few days, so you'll get some advance notice about that. Patreon.com/SW7X7 if you're not yet a patron of the show. But that is going to do it for today. So thank you so much for joining me for this episode and every episode, as always, and may the Force be with you, wherever in the world you may be.
This podcast is not endorsed or sponsored yet by Lucasfilm Limited, Disney, or 20th Century Fox. It is intended for entertainment and information purposes only. Star Wars, the Star Wars logo, all names and pictures of Star Wars characters, vehicles, and any other related Star Wars items are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of Lucasfilm Limited or their respective trademark and copyright holders. May the Force be with them. All original content is copyright 2019 by Star Wars 7x7. We hope you love it.